The Buffalo Bills just put the Denver Broncos on fraud watch. Today, in this episode, I'm going to break down about 30 different reasons on why I believe the Denver Broncos aren't who they say they are. I know they're the number one seed. They're not telling us that they're going to, go win the thing or whatever, but this is a team that has very real holes. Bills Mafia, I hope you're going to get excited today. I did some work. I did some digging. I looked at the quarterbacks they played. I looked at very specifically one matchup against the Commanders with a backup quarterback, and really just some of the holes that the Denver Broncos have that the Buffalo Bills absolutely can exploit. Just a couple quick things before we begin here. We did see just a moment ago that Tyrell Shavers tore his ACL. So Gabe Davis and Tyrell Shavers this week tore their ACLs. This is a circus in the wide receiver position. It's a bummer. But again, before we get into this episode and all the details that I'm going to break down, thanks for clicking on this video. My name is Collin. This whole thing is called Crack the Table. We're all Bills, no breaks, breaking down Buffalo Bills content every single day. If you are looking for a home of all things Buffalo Bills, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It just takes 1 second. Hit subscribe. But also, if you're regularly watching these and you get value from these shows, these episodes, make sure to smash the like button. It helps me out. It gets these videos out to more and more Buffalo Bills fans, and that keeps the lights on for me. But that being said, let's get right into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is this right here. Look on the screen with me. You can see it. The Buffalo Bills right now are the betting favorites to win on Saturday in Mile High Stadium at the elevation, coming off a bye week for the Broncos and a short week for the Buffalo Bills. It really doesn't matter. The betting markets know that a year ago, the Buffalo Bills absolutely beat the brakes off the Denver Broncos. And while this year I don't necessarily expect the same level of beatdown, I do suspect, and I do believe, and of course I'm biased, that the Buffalo Bills absolutely have what it takes, despite these injuries, despite the short week, despite the bye week for the Broncos, despite the hype of Bo Nix and Bo leaving and Sean Payton and how he's having a great coaching year, all that, despite all the positives for the Broncos, which I'll be fair-minded later this week again. I'll talk about those again some other time. But for now, there is very real, even like unfortunate reasons for the Denver Broncos on why the Buffalo Bills should win. So the betting markets are reflecting that. First and foremost, at the beginning of this season, the Denver Broncos' strength of schedule was ranked like 15th overall based off 2024 opponents. Well, the regular season for 2025 has completed. Now they are ranked at best, depending on what metrics you use, 26th overall. In other words, their path to the number one seed was the 26th or worse easiest path in the entire NFL. Now, of course, the Patriots are right there with them, and we've been talking all year about the weakness of schedule for the Patriots, so this isn't a new statistic to us, but they played 9 games against, seemingly good opponents in 2024. They were 9 teams that would have been playoff teams, but frankly, they had the majority of their games against bottom 10 teams, and a lot of the teams that were playoff teams last year didn't even make the playoffs this year because they really regressed as teams. But on top of their weak playoff schedule, I think there's something really important to note that actually adds a bit more context to the schedule they actually played, which is why a lot of these teams saw regression. They played the Titans in week 1, a rookie quarterback, first overall pick, first game ever against a Titans team, which we can look back retrospectively and know that this team struggled. You go down the list of this and you can just look week by week and just see some of this, but there's some things that stand out. Yeah, they beat some bad teams with some good quarterbacks, but they also played different teams in different games against different, they played a lot of backup quarterbacks is really what I want to say. Yeah, they played some guys. They played, Cam Ward. They played Jake Browning earlier in the season. And frankly, Jake Browning against the Bengals, even in that week 4 matchup, we knew how bad he was, right? That the Bengals were like, this guy is such a bad backup quarterback. We have to literally go get Joe Flacco. We know that. Not only that, but there was other guys like Davis Mills having to come in for CJ Stroud. And we know how CJ Stroud has already struggled in the playoffs. But they also, again, had to play week 13 against the Commanders against Marcus Mariota. The Commanders were already out of the playoff hunt. The Commanders were already, flailing, looking at a draft pick, yet week 13, they have to go into overtime to win against the Commanders. Not only that, against whether that's the Raiders, whether it's the Packers, or some of these other games, even against Trevor Lawrence. They lost against Trevor Lawrence in the last couple weeks of the season, plus a couple backup quarterbacks in week 17 and 18. This isn't a really strong resume for a number 1 seed. This is why we use the phrase fraud watch. The QB slate that they played has been noted by some analysts as wild. And again, a lot of them are being like, man, they look at the defensive metrics and the stats that are absolutely inflated because of who they played this year. Now, again, you can't control on who you play, so we'll be a little bit fair-minded with this. You have to play who's in front of you, but when you look at who's in front of you, you have to be like, wow, this defense, which again, if you look at the statistics, yeah, they're a top defense in the NFL, only allowing 18.3 points per game. There is reason for that. But one thing that's I think is really concerning for this Denver Broncos team is this stat right here. In spite of the weak schedule they played, or with the weak schedule they played, and the weak quarterbacks that they played, they also had a weak strength of victory, or rather margin of victory in only 5.3 points. Now, yeah, you could look at the Buffalo Bills and say, well, yeah, they only had 5.9 points on their margin of victory. But again, I think the context really matters. Tell me a couple games this year that the Buffalo Bills were playing backups. Tell me a couple games, as much as the Denver Broncos were, that they were playing these second or third string quarterbacks. It just wasn't the case. That wasn't the same metric or the same issue for the Buffalo Bills. Not only that, but this team, this offensive team for the Denver Broncos is not ranked like number 3 or number 4 in the NFL. They're like 14th in the NFL. Yeah, they've got a lot of wins. They scored 401 total points, about 23.6 points per game, 14th in the NFL, and their defense was pretty good. But the thing that's also was really a metric to me that was really like kind of funny is in 2025, the Denver Broncos improves to 6-2 on the season in 1-score games after last year being 1-6. In other words, at this point last year, during the season last year, they had a ton of wins or a ton of losses based off these one-score games. But now this year, it's totally flipped. Luck has fallen back in their favor. And in some sense, even if you look right here, 7 of their 8 games against top 10 teams or top 10 draft teams were decided by 1 score. So even the teams that have bad and low draft capital, or high draft capital rather, they needed a lot of extra, support to beat these teams. Right? It's just highlighting a reliance on some of these late game heroics rather than like blowout wins against good teams. This is a team who struggles against bad teams. They have real holes in their roster. Again, the big one that I'm going to highlight in just a moment is that overtime 27-26 win against the Commanders when the Commanders were playing for nothing. The Denver Broncos were playing for the division. The Denver Broncos were playing for the 1 seed. The Commanders, with a backup quarterback, had to get taken to overtime to get that win. Not only that, you look at games like games against the Jets with Justin Fields, where they only won by 2 games. It's underscoring a major lack of separation against weaker opponents. It's consistent, which is why analysts from all over the place talk about the real overrated nature of this Denver Broncos team. This guy, was mentioning that they're overrated. He says why? As mentioned, of all the AFC's top-end teams, the Denver Broncos stand out as the number 1 seed that is ripe for the picking. 10 of its 14 wins came against losing teams. 12 came against comebacks. 11 by 1 score. 6 teams had a better scoring margin than the Denver Broncos. In other words, another way to see this is the Denver Broncos defense has been stellar. They've played lesser opponents. I think that context really does matter. But the quarterback Bo Nix suffered somewhat of a massive sophomore slump. He is the league's 28th highest passer rating. Now, what does that mean? It means that this quarterback, Bo Nix, while he's had some heroics, while he's had some positive plays, you can look up highlights. You can look up highlights of any quarterback in the NFL. But this offense, this team is inflated by their stats, their ranks are really inflated by the weakness of their schedule. And not only that, Bo Nix has some real struggles. And I'm just going to turn the page a second. Josh Allen just showed us last week that he's the number 1 quarterback in the world. You ask any single person on the Broncos side what they're nervous about, what they're scared of. It's Josh Allen, number 17. It's a guy who's the reigning MVP up to this point. We'll see what happens with that this year. I don't know if he's going to get it. But he just showed, and I just showed you yesterday with some of these metrics, that Josh Allen is not only far and away the best player in the world, he's the best player in the universe. He is the guy who's absolutely everything we need him to be. And Bo Nix is almost the opposite. He's almost the league's worst passer with passer rating. There's so many statistics like this. And even right now, when you look at the screen, here's another one. This is turnover differential. The Buffalo Bills are positive in turnover differential because they're making the most out of the games. They're making the most out of the plays. The Denver Broncos themselves are -3 on the turnover differential. They're not a team that's dominating with these. Yes, they're the best sacking team in the NFL, but Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are going to have a word with that. But even so, even the end of the season, yeah, they were getting some better turnover differential, but it doesn't really matter when you start to look at the stats. It doesn't really matter because their team is still allowing in the last handful of games like 26 points per game. While overall through the last part of this, or through the whole part of the season, they were only averaging like 18 points given up per game. The last like 5 games, their defense has been worse. Even again, when you look at like this game against the Commanders, a team who really like wasn't fighting for anything. Nick Bonino has to bat away a 2-point try in overtime in order for in order for the Broncos to escape with the win. This is a team that wasn't fighting for anything. But again, when you start to look at this and you look at even that matchup, the reporters for the Commanders were saying McLaurin's presence and production helped open things up for the rest of Washington's weapons. And this is where I think things get a little sticky for the Denver Broncos. Tight end Zach Ertz caught 10 passes, 13 targets, 106 yards. Not only that, they had some other production. But the thing that I look at when I look at this Broncos team and the way that the Buffalo Bills can really exploit them, it's Dawson Knox and it's Dalton Kincaid, who, by the way, it was totally precautionary that he had a walking boot on. Don't buy into any of the media hype that's going around that he's going to be out or anything like that. He's going to play. He's going to continue to put his body on the line, and the Broncos are going to lose because of guys like Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. Again, there is a lot to acknowledge with this team. Even just maybe a couple other things. The Broncos, even coming from some of their own media, is officially on fraud watch after even their last game against the Raiders. Not only that, the biggest strengths, yes, their pass rush. We got to give them credit. Their pass rush is incredible. But they have a great weakness, which is also a weakness of the Bills, is that they cannot run the ball very well. I had a Broncos fan text me that they wish that J.K. Dobbins was back because they don't really trust R.J. Harvey, or R.J. Harvey really isn't the joker that they thought he was going to be. The Broncos aren't running the ball incredibly efficient. Actually, just overall, their offense kind of stinks. It might be a top 14 unit statistically, but it's mega inconsistent. They've had a couple big games and a lot of stinkers. And that being said, I think the Buffalo Bills defense can stop this 25th ranked rushing team in 2025. Not only that, we might get Ed Oliver back. If we get Ed Oliver back for this game, we have Deion Walker, Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, and Joey Bosa ready on that front side of the defensive line, and Shaq Thompson coming out of the linebacking core. This is going to be a great run-stuffing team. Further, when you look at, like, again, just the jury's still out. Coming from the Broncos' own websites, the jury's still out on this. After 17 games, it's time to make a decision on who the Broncos are. They're so concerned about who they are. They believe that they themselves are frauds. There's a massive amount of conservative play for Bo Nix for this offense. They really fail. They rely so heavily on short passes. They rely so heavily on the scheme to make yards and to do things. They're not that incredible. They struggle with penalties. They struggle with discipline. They struggle with turnovers. This is the same conversation we were having with the Jaguars. It was time for the team to regress to the mean, and we saw it happen with the Jaguars, and I believe we're going to see it happen again with the Broncos. The playoff outlook for the Denver Broncos looks great because they get to play against a team that has little rest, they have extra rest, and they're playing at home. It doesn't matter, though. The Denver Broncos have a lot of weaknesses as we've navigated, but one that's a final nail in the coffin to me. If you look right here on the screen, the Denver Broncos have had 4 coaches. Defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, Davis Webb, special teams coordinator, and even defensive back coach Jim Leonhard. They all were getting interest from different teams to be coaches in their respective teams. What does that mean? I don't know if you guys remember this, but last year, when the Detroit Lions were making a playoff push, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Lions, was going and getting interviews from the Chicago Bears, and I believe maybe some other teams. It showed in the playoffs. The Denver Broncos have 4 of their key coaches off getting interviews for other teams. Instead of being focused on the game plan, Instead of looking and being ready for the upcoming matchup against the Buffalo Bills, these guys are looking at the futures of their careers and they're saying, where can I go? Who can I interview for? That's really compelling to me. It's telling me that while the Buffalo Bills have their head locked in on a Lombardi, the coaching staff of the Denver Broncos is off gallivanting, looking for bigger paydays and bigger roles and bigger positions. They're looking for clout. They're looking for victory even before the game's already played. But in all of it, man, we had a rough injury report today. We're going to break it down tomorrow, but you can see it right there on the screen. In all of this, let me know what you think down in the comments. What do you think why do you think maybe the Denver Broncos are on fraud watch? Where did I go a little too hard in this video? Or where are you excited to exploit the weaknesses of the Denver Broncos? In all of it, have a great day. My name is Collin. Peace out.